in the heart of the Vega cluster, where the brightest minds and most powerful dignitaries drifted above crystal floors on anti-gravity platforms, an alien woman stood alone, unnoticed and underestimated. Her long, elegant ears caught the shimmering light as if marking her apart from the crowd, her silver hair glinting like starlight, her presence both commanding and quietly defiant. The nobles whispered, scoffed, and dismissed her, certain that a solitary outsider could never disrupt their carefully orchestrated hierarchy. Yet the galaxy has a strange way of rewarding those who see beyond appearances. One human man, unbound by prejudice or protocol, knelt before her without hesitation. A single gesture that would ripple through the rigid assembly, challenge centuries of tradition, and spark an unexpected bond that could reshape interstellar relations forever. In a universe ruled by status, power, and appearances, courage can arrive in the most subtle acts, humor can unravel the stiffest of decorum, and respect can ignite where none was expected. This is the story of how one act of empathy, one playful glance, and one unanticipated connection changed the course of a world, and perhaps an entire galaxy. The grand hall of the Vega cluster's assembly shimmered with an almost irritating brilliance, each surface of the crystal alley walls catching and fracturing the light from the hovering luminescent orbs above. Delegates from countless star systems drifted on their anti-grav platforms, bobbing gently like oversized, self-important insects as they exchanged greetings that were more about showing off social protocol than actual conversation. Somewhere in the corner, a bot in a too-tight service uniform tripped over its own treads, sending a tray of sparkling iridescent drinks flying, only to catch it in a display of mechanical panache that elicited scattered chuckles from a few nobles attempting to conceal their amusement. Amid all this orchestrated chaos, she stood, an anomaly that even the hall's perfection could not ignore. The alien woman looked, at first glance, remarkably human. Her body moved with that effortless grace that made every slight tilt of her head or step seem intentional, even when it was. But the first thing that betrayed her otherworldly origin were her ears, long and elegant, curving back with subtle sophistication, catching stray reflections of the hall's light like polished silver blades. Her skin carried a soft luminescence, not enough to be glaring, but enough to make her seem perpetually illuminated from within, as if the air around her recognized her importance before the nobles ever would. Her hair was silver, cascading in waves that shimmered faintly as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, and she wore a flowing gown that clung just enough to suggest form while letting her move freely, an almost imperceptible twinkle in the fabric hinting at some form of adaptive nanoweave. She smiled politely as she approached a group of nobles who were deep in discussion about the latest interstellar trade sanctions. "Greetings," she said, her voice carrying a melodic lilt that made even the most distracted delegate look up briefly. One elderly noble coughed, then, failing in his attempt to be subtle, sneezed directly toward her. She raised a delicate hand in mock salute, quipping lightly, "Ah, the traditional greeting of your species, I see. Always appreciated." A few awkward chuckles followed, and one young noble hastily shifted on his floating platform as if to distance himself from the alien woman's radiant presence. Every interaction she attempted was met with a polite but unmistakable dismissal. She could see the flickers of judgment in their eyes, the tight smiles of nobles forced into civility. One particularly pompous aristocrat, hovering slightly higher than most on his platform, leaned down and said, "We are not accustomed to your kind, being present at such a gathering without a sponsor." She arched an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips, and replied with a dry elegance, "Well, consider me an unsponsored curiosity, then. Surely the novelty is worth some recognition." A few stifled snickers bubbled from nearby delegates, though most chose to ignore her entirely, busying themselves with adjusting their hover settings or smoothing out imaginary wrinkles in their uniforms. She drifted toward the central chamber, where a holographic map of the Vega cluster rotated lazily, displaying star systems with names most humans couldn't pronounce. Her eyes traced the orbiting planets and shifting trade routes with quiet interest, muttering under her breath, "Imagine designing a commerce network that actually works. I wonder if any of these esteemed planners have considered gravity wells. The muttering went unnoticed, which suited her just fine. She had never been one to wait for validation. Yet beneath her composed exterior, a faint flicker of irritation lingered. These nobles, so wrapped up in hierarchy and appearances, were blind to the simple fact that true competence often arrived without ceremony. It was then that the human man appeared, moving with casual ease through the hovering nobles and errant bots. He did not pause to adjust a platform or bow to the rigid social codes. He simply walked, a small, knowing smile on his face, as if he had already guessed the absurdity of the situation. He approached the alien woman, whose eyes followed his progress with a mixture of curiosity and mild suspicion. Before anyone could react, he dropped to one knee in a gesture that sent a ripple of gasps through the hall. Hovering nobles wobbled, one nearly colliding with a wall before correcting his course. A young diplomat whispered, "Did he just kneel?" The woman blinked, caught between surprise and amusement. "You do realize this is highly irregular, don't you?" she asked, the corners of her mouth twitching as she allowed herself a faint laugh. "I'm not a queen. Kneeling is optional, though admittedly flattering." The man grinned, tilting his head slightly. "Respect is never optional." Her laughter, clear and musical, cut through the tense atmosphere like a beacon. A hovering tray bot, inspired perhaps by the shift in energy, executed an elaborate spin before depositing drinks back onto its tray, drawing a round of genuine laughter from a few younger nobles who hadn't yet mastered their stoic facades. For the first time in the gathering, the hall's rigid formality felt almost human, almost alive. The alien woman straightened, her ears flicking lightly as she studied the man before her. There was something in his bold disregard for custom, a simplicity that carried weight, that made her momentarily forget the snickers and sideways glances of the rest of the assembly. In his small act of courage, kneeling without fear, without concern for judgment, she recognized the rarest of qualities: sincerity. As the laughter settled and the hall began to hum with a cautious curiosity, she allowed herself to think, not for the first time, that perhaps this day would be remembered not for the dismissal of her presence, but for the audacity of one man's choice to see her worth immediately. And as her ears flicked with a mixture of amusement and intrigue, she couldn't resist a teasing comment, loud enough for several hovering nobles to hear. "Careful, human. At this rate, you might start a trend among the dangerously obedient." The man only grinned wider, and together they stood as anomalies in a hall devoted to conformity, their quiet humor and mutual recognition rippling through the rigid structure of interstellar diplomacy in ways neither the nobles nor the hovering bots could yet comprehend. The alien woman adjusted the folds of her gown with a casual elegance, her long ears flicking with every subtle sound around the hall, catching faint echoes of conversations she hadn't meant to hear. She had grown accustomed to the hum of hover platforms, the low chatter of diplomats, and the occasional clatter of malfunctioning service bots. Yet there was something about this human man, kneeling earlier and now standing at a respectful distance, that drew her attention more than the entire assembly combined. He moved without the exaggerated stiffness of protocol, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor, carrying a confidence that seemed almost absurd in its simplicity. "I suppose you're planning to mock the entire room next?" she asked, a sly curve to her lips. Her voice was light, teasing, but carried a melodic undertone that made the words linger. He chuckled, a low, genuine sound that cut through the artificial shimmer of the hall's lighting. "Mock? No. Entertain? Maybe. But mostly, I plan to survive this assembly without being vaporized by politeness." Her laugh was musical, rising above the hum of drones and the quiet hissing of air filtration channels. A few nearby nobles shifted uncomfortably, unsure if it was proper to laugh at someone else's jokes or at their own discomfort. The man's grin widened, and for a moment, the alien woman found herself appreciating the sheer audacity of humor in the face of such stifling formality. "Survival," she mused, eyes scanning the rotating holographic map of the Vega cluster that dominated the chamber. "Most prefer strategy, alliances, manipulation. You're brave, or perhaps reckless." She flicked a silver lock of hair behind her shoulder, the gesture casual but precise. Or is it simply foolishness that spares you the usual pompous scrutiny? He shrugged, his smile never faltering. A little of both, I imagine. But if foolishness allows me to witness someone truly extraordinary without kneeling to ego, I'll gladly take the risk. Her ears twitched in amusement. The compliment was unspoken, yet conveyed with a grace that spoke louder than any speech the nobles had prepared. She stepped closer, letting her gown brush softly against the polished floor, and gestured toward the floating platforms scattered throughout the hall. Do you know what's hilarious? All of them, up there, thinking they command respect simply by floating a meter off the ground. Gravity makes them feel important. He laughed outright this time, a bright sound that caught the attention of a few junior delegates, who found themselves unable to resist smiling despite themselves. And yet, he said, nodding toward the cluster of hovering dignitaries, somehow they still managed to make even the air feel heavy. She tilted her head, her ears flicking as she studied him. There was a warmth in his humor that softened the cold precision of the chamber, a levity that seemed to shift the atmosphere without the nobles noticing, or wanting to. She found herself wondering how someone could navigate a gathering designed to suffocate spontaneity without tripping over the rigid choreography of etiquette. Clearly, he had found the loophole, and he did it with an ease that was enviable. A sudden commotion drew their attention. A junior ambassador had accidentally activated a small anti-gravity sphere in the center of the hall, sending a stack of floating data tablets spinning in a chaotic orbit above their heads. Delegates shouted, hover platforms wobbled, and a small service bot attempted to intervene by extending mechanical arms that promptly tangled in the orbiting devices. The alien woman's eyes sparkled with amusement, and she leaned slightly toward the man. You see, this is why I enjoy these gatherings. Chaos disguised as diplomacy. You can almost pretend it's intentional. He grinned, watching the spiraling tablets narrowly miss a dignitary's elaborate headdress. And somehow, the universe conspires to make sure even the mistakes are entertaining. For a few moments, the two of them observed the spinning mayhem in companionable silence, the humor of the situation cutting through any lingering tension. Around them, the assembly continued, nobles adjusting platforms and clearing disrupted papers, their expressions a blend of outrage and embarrassment. Yet the alien woman remained unshaken, her composure intact, her silver hair catching the refracted light in a way that seemed to mock the self-importance of the gathering. Finally, she turned her attention fully to him, curiosity mingling with amusement. "You're different," she said softly, not the harsh whisper of accusation, but an intrigued murmur. Most humans and most beings would either freeze, bow awkwardly, or try to impress with technical jargon. You just exist in the room and make sense of it all without trying to bend it to your will. He raised an eyebrow, clearly pleased but not surprised. And yet, here I am doing precisely that. Perhaps it's the human condition, survive first, overthink later. Her laughter, musical and light, filled the space again, though this time it carried a note of genuine fondness. "Survival is admirable," she replied, "but occasionally one must also know when to enjoy the absurdity. And I see you, human, are particularly skilled at that." Their exchange drew a few glances from nearby delegates, but none dared interrupt. The alien woman felt a quiet satisfaction. Here, finally, was someone unbound by hierarchy, someone who recognized that wit and insight often mattered more than titles and hover platforms. As she gestured toward the holographic map, and they began to discuss distant star systems, trade routes, and the occasional ridiculous bureaucratic misstep with playful sarcasm, the hall's rigid formality began to feel like background noise. The man's easy humor paired with her sharp wit created an unexpected rhythm, a cadence that drew attention subtly without demanding it. A service bot, sensing perhaps the lighter mood, executed an overly elaborate bow before offering them refreshments, which they accepted with exaggerated gratitude, eliciting laughter from each other and a few bolder juniors who dared to join. Even the hovering nobles, for a fleeting moment, seemed slightly less intimidating, their frowns softened by the audible mirth resonating through the chamber. By the time they stepped aside to observe a rotating display of nearby planetary systems, the alien woman realized something profound yet simple. The human man's courage wasn't in kneeling once before her. It was in navigating the absurdity of the assembly with humor, humility, and a kind of fearless curiosity that made her, for the first time, feel that her presence truly mattered. And as her long ears twitched in amusement, she thought, not for the first time, that perhaps this unexpected companionship could change far more than just the perception of a single alien in a hall full of no